Hey, what's going on, everyone? This is going to be a DVD review of Chris Jericho's documentary. I just want to talk about the documentary for this video. Eventually, later on in the week, I'll do an audio-only video for the matches. I just think it'll work a lot better that way. So yeah, very excited that Jericho got his own DVD. I just finished the documentary. It was awesome. It was amazing. It was pretty much everything we expected. So it was about an hour and 45 minutes. So yeah, so let's break it down. I find documentary reviews very, very tough to do. I don't know why. It's just a lot tougher, but I'll try to do the best I can. So, all right, so DVD pretty much picks up when Jericho graduates from high school at 17, wants to go to the Hart Brothers wrestling camp in Calgary, but you have to be 18 to attend. So he actually went to community college first, got a degree in journalism, which I think helped him a lot as far as his promo ability and things like that. So once he turned 19, he decided to go to the to move out to Calgary to wrestle at the Hart Brothers Wrestling Academy. And he really stressed that Lance Storm pushed him hard. If he said if it was not for Lance Storm, Jericho would not be where he is today, because all the other guys in the camp really weren't that athletic. So it was up to them to really push each other, and that was exactly what happened. So, from there, someone recommended Jericho to go down to Mexico, hooked up with someone, and he ended up in Mexico. While Jericho was in Mexico, he really felt like he was becoming a bigger star. Fans were going crazy for him. He had a huge following. The women loved him down in Mexico. His magazine covers, wrestled 10 times a week down in Mexico. So, and you said Mexico really brought out a lot of character in him. They didn't get to show in the independent scene in Canada. So that was pretty interesting. Then from Mexico, we move on to Germany. Jericho spent about a couple months in Germany, I believe. And he really said that, the stuff that he learned in Germany still helps him today in the business, because in Germany they had to wrestle in the same place every single night. So you really had to switch it up and do different things. So wrestling in Germany is what made him a lot smarter. So that was interesting to see. But, there wasn't a lot of B-roll for the Germany stuff. They really couldn't use a lot of footage. So from there we go to Smoky Mountain Wrestling, which I believe was Jim Cornette's promotion. This was like around 94. They tagged him up with Lance Storm to be in a tag team. He really stressed that, in Smoky Mountain Wrestling is where, this is where he got a lot better doing promos. They let him get on the mic with Lance Storm, and it was just hilarious in some of those promos. So, then from Smoky Mountain, he went to Japan around 95, and he wrestled for a promotion called War, I think. It wasn't really All Japan or New Japan. It was like the promotion right underneath them. So, yeah, they didn't really go into depth with the Super J Cup from 95. Obviously, no Benoit footage was allowed on this DVD set, but I'll talk more about that later. But yeah, in Japan, he wrestled Ultimo Dragon. As many of you guys probably know from reading Jericho's book, Foley recommended him to Paul Heyman after the Ultimo Dragon match. But, the great part about this part of the documentary was, Jericho said that, this is what made him the total package, wrestling in Canada, the character that, wrestling in Mexico brought a lot of character out of him. Wrestling in Germany really smartened him up. Smoky Mountain Wrestling got, really showcased his promo ability, and then going to Japan's where he really became a great wrestler. So he said, combine those into one. That's pretty much, the total package. That's why Jericho believes that's what made him the total package. Wrestling all over the world. So the documentary really did a great job of, that portion of it. I really thought that came off well. And yeah, Jericho's sound bites throughout the whole documentary just came off awesome. He was really, really into it, really passionate, really, he was funny as well. So that was great. From there we actually go to ECW. So Jericho's in ECW. Joey Styles did a great job of talking about how, the ECW fans really already knew who Jericho was because they were so smart, because, they were tape traders. They already were knowledgeable about the international wrestling scene. So as soon as Jericho came into ECW, he was a star. They talked about the suplex on Taz, which really put him over the top. And I mean, they didn't go too much. There wasn't a lot of ECW footage. From ECW, obviously, then he went to WCW. He met Eric Bischoff at some kind of convention in Los Angeles with Mexican wrestlers, and ECW guys were there. And Bischoff pretty much offered him a job on the spot. And so, obviously, when we get to WCW, we talked about how the cruiserweights really put WCW over the top. So WWE might have had better main events than WCW, but from top to bottom, WCW shows were a lot better, and it was because of guys like Jericho, Benoit, Malenko, Guerrero, Ultimo Dragon, and Rey Mysterio, guys like that. So, I mean, we pretty much knew about this stuff from the Monday Night War DVD. So, but yeah, in WCW, he really, at first when he was a babyface, he felt like it was kind of forced. When they turned him heel, he was like, oh, thank God, you know, because he could finally be himself. You know, when he was a heel, he felt like he had a lot of freedom out there. Yeah, he seemed like he was having a good time in WCW. Like, he was just doing like crazy shit, like whatever the hell he wanted, and did some cool things. They spent a lot of time on the 1004 Holds promo with Dean Malenko. Uh, the conspiracy thing, they talked about that, and then when they spent a lot of time on the Goldberg thing. You know, the Goldberg thing is what really made Jericho want to leave WCW, because he started cutting these great promos on Goldberg. It was really getting under Goldberg's skin, and then, you know, the storyline actually took on a life of its own. They talked about how Goldberg really was starting to get pissed off at Jericho for some of the things he was saying, and Jericho actually wanted to have a big-time pay-per-view match because, you know, the angle was going over so well with Jericho disrespecting Goldberg, you know, with the Greenberg thing. I'm sure some of you guys might remember that. So, yeah, but, you know, but the fact is, WCW management decided that they wanted Goldberg just to squash Jericho, and Jericho was totally against that idea because, you know, what was the point of building up the whole thing for 2 months if they're just going to have Goldberg squash him on TV? You know, Jericho felt like this was a huge chance for him to, you know, draw money on a pay-per-view, and WCW was totally against the idea. So that was pretty much, you know, the straw that broke the camel's back. So, but overall, I would say Jericho's stuff in WCW wasn't really that bad. I mean, obviously, I would think some people would argue that that was probably the best work of his career as far as promos and just having great matches. So it wasn't a total disaster like, you know, some people try to make it out to be sometimes. So, but yeah, then he goes to the WWE. Obviously, they did the huge thing with The Rock, you know, the debut when he interrupted The Rock. One of the best moments in WWE history. I mean, it was just an awesome moment. Just the song. It was just very, very well done. Talked about that. But yeah, this is the most interesting part of the documentary. He started to get really depressed, actually, when he first came to the WWF because, you know, he wasn't on the pay-per-views at first. No Mercy 1999. He saw Edge and Christian and the Hardys steal the show at No Mercy, and then he was kind of like just in the bleachers, you know, just kind of like thinking like, you know, why am I in this position? I was, you know, in a promo with The Rock 2 months earlier. Now I'm in this position. So, and then he was kind of pissed off when they put him against China. They asked him, "How do you feel about working with a woman?" And then Jericho was like, you know, deep down inside, he was like, "Really?" But then, you know, he was like, "You know, I'll do it." But then he, as most of you guys know, he wrestled China, defeated her for the Intercontinental Championship. And you know, I think that's when things started to take off for Jericho. I think, you know, fans started turning against China, so, you know, Jericho automatically kind of became a fan favorite, and it pretty much just carried over from there. And you know, they really spent a lot of time on Stephanie McMahon. You know, the Stephanie McMahon promos. You know, that's Jericho said that's what really, you know, brought the best out of him. That's what really like made him. You know, it got to show a lot of his character because he was just himself. You know, and the stuff between Jericho and Stephanie, they just had amazing chemistry, as you guys know. You know, I don't know. I just think Stephanie was the perfect girl to cut those promos on because, you know, you can tell she's such a bitch and she just has that attitude about her. And, you know, it wouldn't have worked as well with Trish or any other girl. So I just think, you know, Jericho and Stephanie together were just gold. I mean, that pretty much lasted for 2 years. I mean, it never got old. It was just hilarious. But, you know, they totally skipped over the Benoit stuff. You know, for you guys that don't know, Jericho and Benoit had a great rivalry in 2000 over the Intercontinental title. But, you know, for obvious reasons, they pretty much just skipped they skipped over that stuff, obviously. So, but yeah, they talked about the Triple H match. You know, Jericho won the belt from Triple H, and then they reversed the decision. And, you know, that was a huge reaction for Jericho. I mean, they even Jericho talked about he never received a reaction like that. All right, so from there we go to the, you know, Undisputed Championship matches. You know, at Vengeance 2001, it was decided to have a unified champion. So, but I think originally the plan was to give it to Kurt Angle. But, you know, in retrospect, I think giving it the belts to Jericho was the right decision. You know, because Angle had pretty much done everything. I don't think he really needed it. But Jericho, you know, was still becoming that main event type of player. But, you know, he defeated The Rock, then he defeated Austin. Personally, for me, I think this could have been done a lot better. Just the way Jericho beat Austin, I just didn't like it with the interference. And, you know, this is the first ever Undisputed Champion. I really felt like Austin should have went out of his way and, you know, did a better job of, you know, putting Jericho over. But I understand, you know, Jericho kind of was just in the midst of turning heel, so it definitely added a lot of heat to his heel character. So, but yeah, I mean, that was pretty cool. Jericho admitted it was awesome to be the first ever undisputed champion, obviously. And then from there, they actually had Jericho and Stephanie team up, which Jericho was totally against. Jericho did not like it. I mean, obviously, Jericho and Stephanie as heels feuding with Triple H as a face, I just don't think it worked. And then that leads us to WrestleMania 18. Obviously, you thought it was, even though the match wasn't that great with Triple H at WrestleMania 18, it's still cool to main event, WrestleMania in your home country, which was in Canada that year. So it was in Toronto, Canada. So, but yeah, Jericho really felt like Hogan and Rock should have main evented the show. He felt like there was no chance that anyone could follow it, and he knew that going into the match. But for those that don't know, I think Triple H was actually the guy that, he said this in his DVD. Triple H said that, if you put Hogan Rock last, then you piss on everyone that's ever had the belt before. So that's what happened. But yeah, I think the Jericho Triple H main event would have came off a lot better if it was, if it was in the spot that Hogan and Rock was in. I just think it would have worked a lot better. But yeah, from there, I mean, they talk about Jericho teaming up with Christian. Jericho and Christian made a hilarious tag team, as most of you guys know. I mean, I think it's pretty underrated. The stuff that they did on Raw was funny as hell. And then they didn't really talk about Trish too much. They didn't really dwell on the Trish Stratus stuff, the whole Jericho versus Christian and Trish. Yeah, then Shawn Michaels, the whole Shawn Michaels feud. He talked about how WrestleMania 19 is pretty much the crowning achievement of his whole career. He said that, it's one thing to main event WrestleMania, but it's a totally different thing to steal the show. And he felt like, Jericho and HBK definitely was the show-stealing match that night. I don't know. I kind of think you can make a case that Angle and Lesnar was the best match of that show, but it's pretty much debatable. But yeah, trying to think what else from there. There's the whole Shawn Michaels Jericho feud. Obviously, they touched on that down the road in the 2008 feud. What else was there? John Cena. I talked about how John Cena and him had pretty good chemistry. I mean, he said that he really pushed for Cena. He really pushed, to wrestle Cena. He said he saw a lot of potential in Cena when other guys didn't. He said that Cena kind of reminds him of Stone Cold Steve Austin. He said, Stone Cold Steve Austin was unorthodox, just like Cena, but he's still amazing though. And yeah, so and then they talked about how Jericho was actually fired from Raw the next night after SummerSlam. In 2005, when Bischoff fired him, Jericho said he wanted to go out like that. That was his choice. To be carried out of the arena like that. So, I'm trying to think of other things that stood out. Wow. All right. So, when he came back to the WWE, he wanted to be better than ever. He didn't want to rest in his accomplishments. And one of the things he said was, the documentary kind of, I think Edge talked about this, how, Jericho was kind of, when he came back as a face, he was kind of stale. It wasn't that, I think it wasn't that he was stale. It was, the business had kind of changed. It was a little bit more fan-friendlier now. The Cena pretty much took over. And it was just a different fan base. So, him doing what he was doing before wasn't going to get over the way it did in the past. So Jericho was thinking of ways to, kind of reinvent his character. Then along the way, he saw some movie. I think it was called No Country for Old Men. He saw that movie, and then, there was this guy that talked really, really slow, really sadistic. So Jericho took that character and kind of, molded it into that, Chris Jericho, the angry man in the suit. Then he started feuding with Shawn Michaels. So it just made sense from there, to just, become that type of heel. So, that leads us to the big Jericho versus Michaels feud, which was an awesome feud. They touched on the whole feud, showed matches from the whole feud. Really, really went into depth with that. And focused a lot on Rey Mysterio. Jericho and Mysterio had a great feud in 2009. I mean, this is probably the best series of matches anyone had in the WWE from 2009. Jericho talked about how, him and Mysterio never really, I mean, they had matches before, but they never really did some serious business together. So that was pretty much it. And then they talked about how Jericho and Edge were supposed to be a huge tag team. They were supposed to have a huge tag team title reign. But then Edge got hurt. I think eventually the plan was actually to have them wrestle at WrestleMania, actually split them up. But Edge got injured. So then when Edge came back to the Royal Rumble, that's when they set up the WrestleMania match. Not really much to talk about there. And I just thought it was very, very well done. I know this probably isn't the best documentary review